Okay, so we just finished we have a data frame which we imported from Wikipedia, and it's got the populations, and we're trying to select just columns by position, and we just did did one part of this, which I called part 1. Now I'll call this part 2. Okay, so what we saw that we could select 2 columns, but then when we put them together, that it should really be a data frame. So we're using the single brackets here, and so we do get this data frame here. So we have to try and remember that the 2 brackets gives us a column, but the single bracket gives us a data frame. So try to remember that. And here, in general, we would have to take out from a data frame, if we want to take out various various columns, we would use this. Okay, and we'd just list in here the columns that we wanted, surrounded by the concatenation operator and single brackets here, right? And so really, you have to think of the fact that a data frame that just contains one column is different than just a single column. A single column is like a vector, but a data frame that contains a single column is still a data frame, and some difference there. And in fact, a single column will be a factor. Okay, now some more confusion. So when I do this, I get a column, right? But when I do this, what do I get? This is weird. What am I getting? What is that, 18? That is this is telling me, take the first row and the third column. What is that? The first row is here, actually, and the third column, so it's 18. So the first row and the third column. Or if we did it again, take the second row and say the first column. So we get Bogota, and tells us a little bit more, gives us some extra information. It says there were 31 levels in the first column, and actually it reports all of them, or not all of them, it does ... But it starts to report all of them. Okay? And now that's because it was a factor, so it does that. So anyway, and yeah, is this a factor, or is this a data frame? How about if we did class? Oops. Yeah, it's a factor. It's not a data frame. Okay? So we're getting vectors, or vectors, not data frames anyway. Now, what does this give us? So we have the single brackets here. So we might expect that it's just going to give us a vector, and but we're using this kind of common notation, and this is not the concatenation notation, right, which we used before, which gave us a couple columns. That's not what that's not the same, right? Let's go back and check that. Right, this was we put cpop and concatenation 1, 7. Now there's no C here, this C, and there's no these brackets there because there's no C there. And I don't have the 1, but I just have the comma something. So I have comma 1 in this case. What is this going to give me? It's going to give me row column. The first entry is a row, the second entry is the column, so it's just the column 1. So you might guess that it's going to give you the entire column 1 as, not as a data frame though. So let's check it. Okay, so it gives it to you not as a data frame, but as a vector, in this case a factor. Now here comes a little bit of hell, because what does this give you? Well, I think it's going to give us basically the same thing as we got without the comma, actually. I'm not sure that it's going to give us anything different than with or without the comma. Now let's remember, without that comma, without this comma, what did we get when we did this? We got the first and seventh columns, but it was a data frame, right? And I think this is going to be the same thing. Okay, I think it's the same thing. So that's pretty confusing. So if you do it like this, it's a factor, but if you do it like this, it's a data frame. But I guess it has to be a data frame because it's including 2 columns, sort of. Okay, now let's get even worse. Let's get even more confusing. Okay, here I create a vector, call it vec1, and it's just that. It just has the element 2 in it. And vec2 just has the elements 1 and 7 in them. And if I print them out, you can see vec1 has 2, and vec2 has 1 and 7. Now let's go back to here. Remember we did that. And once again, what does this do? It gives us a what again? Because we're taking 2 columns, it gives us a data frame, right? We did that already. And also go back one more. But what did this do? That gave us a factor. So it's kind of horrible, right? This gives us a factor or a vector, and this gives us a data frame. Now suppose we do this. Now suppose we do that. So what vec1 has what? Just a 2 in it. So if this works sort of the way we might expect it to, then since we just have a single number in here, we're going to get the second column, but is it going to be a vector or a data frame? It's going to be a vector. The result is going to be a vector. However, if I did vec2 here, then what? Vec2 has 1 and 7, so it's like we're putting C17 in there. So what are we going to get? We're going to get the first column and the 7th column, but is it going to be a vector or a data frame? So this time it'll be a data frame. So here, this one, vec1, gives us just a vector, but if I do vec2, it's a data frame. We can see we have these here along the sides. It tells us it's a data frame. So that makes it pretty confusing. Now if you want to be sure that it's one thing or another, you can make sure that it's like a data frame. So even though it's even though we do this, this was going to give us a vector, but if we want it to be a data frame, we can do this. I don't know what drop means, but we can do that. And now it should have been a vector, but now it's a data frame. So try to remember that. So let's just review this. So what does this one do? This just gives you a column, right? Just a vector. So what does this one do? This one gives you a data frame. And what does this do? This also gives you a data frame, but it's and it has more than one column. Now what does this one do though? This one gave me a vector, and this one also gives me a vector. But this one gives me a data frame. Okay, so I don't know how to remember that, but that's the way it is. And then this one, depending on whether vector is a single number or or more than one entry, it will give you a column or vector or a data frame. So if you want to insist that you get a data frame, you put that in there. So that will mean even if this is only one element in vec, it's still going to give you a data frame. So you might need, like if you're programming, you might have to assume that it's a data frame, but if it's a single column, it'll mess it up. But if you put this drop in your code, then you'll be assured that it's a data frame and your code won't break or something like that. So this has been selecting data frame columns by position part 2.